But I want to start with the fight that we're all most excited about this
Yeah.
weekend, and that is the bantamweight championship fight, the great stylistic matchup of the tall, slender, powerful striker in Sean O'Malley and the absolute cardio wrestling machine of Merab Dvalishvili. I'm really excited to break down this matchup because I think, and I want to talk about how both men can win this fight because it is a winnable fight for both men. Obviously, we're going to make predictions and pick one way or the other. But let's start with Merab. What, in your opinion, does Dvalishvili need to do to really stay away from that power that he, I think, is susceptible to getting cracked by and utilize his best skill set, which is the cardio and the wrestling, to beat Sean O'Malley?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And Merab, obviously, on a 10-fight win streak, he's been waiting for his opportunity to get a title shot. And the only reason he hasn't got one sooner is because his friend was the champion up until recently. So he's obviously got to wrestle. And, you know, back in the day, we could say this is a striker versus wrestler matchup. Nowadays, it's a little harder to see those because everybody's so good everywhere. And I'm not saying Merab's not a good striker, and I'm not saying Sugar Sean is not a great grappler, but this one is as close to a wrestler or a grappler versus a striker match that you're going to see in the UFC. It also happens to be the highest level of MMA possible, which makes it very interesting because regardless of the path that you took to get to the UFC and then get to the belt, as long as you come with some sort of dominant style, some sort of discipline that you've really honed the craft to, whether it's Sugar Sean's striking and the innovative things he's doing, or Merab's tenacious wrestling that's so good that, you know, Henry Cejudo found himself on his back several times in their fight. Whatever your style is, whatever it is that makes you work, and I don't think it's just down to your skills. I think it's down to the body type. Sugar Sean's the long, rangy striker that knows how to use every inch of his reach and keep his shorter opponents away from him. He's had a lot of experience doing that, being such a tall 135er. And Merab knows how to get inside on guys. He's usually got a height deficit against most of the people he's fighting, and he still knows how to find his way inside. His striking, you know, he does get him caught from time to time on the entries, but he's so tenacious, he's very tough and durable that he can take a couple shots to get into where he wants it. And once he does do that, he has a way of zapping your gas tank, killing your cardio, all the while seems to be picking up steam. It's almost like he takes it from you and gives it to himself, and that's how he gets this unlimited gas
He
tank.
recharges his batteries with your deficit.
Right, he's like a Tesla and you're a supercharger station, so he's stealing all your energy. And he's so good at winning rounds. He's so good at taking the fight where he wants to do it. But Sugar Sean, most people say he's not a great grappler. We haven't seen that much. And the reason you haven't seen much grappling out of Sugar Sean is because he's so lethal with his hands. He's so good on the feet. He doesn't have to entertain that. And the same sort of thing that happened with Israel Adesanya that everybody started to see is like, okay, we can't stand and strike with this guy, so let's get him to the ground. But he's been working this insane takedown defense up against the cage, out in the open. Everywhere he's really polished, and Sugar Sean's done the same thing. And when you're dealing with these types of guys, they're operating on such a high frequency, and they're so skilled and good with their bodies already that learning these techniques just comes very naturally to them, and they pick up on it quickly. They start innovating, adding new wrinkles into their game. So Merab really does have to press the pressure. He has to push the gas on Sugar Sean, and I think before the last fight, people would probably say Sugar doesn't have much of a chance if it goes past the third round with Merab. But his pacing and his timing in his last two fights, especially the last one, was just a thing of beauty. He really knows how to put the pressure on you, keep hit an offensive attack on you without throwing volume constantly, because no human body can do that for 25 straight minutes. But he knows how to pressure without throwing everything, and then of course he knows how to put the shots on you at the right times. And we saw that even in the championship rounds of his last fight. He was very poised, very collected, and seemed to have a lot of gas. So if Merab wants to win this fight, he's got to zap the energy, and he's got to do it with the grappling, because everybody knows grappling is the most exhausting thing you can do in MMA. And hopefully, if Merab's able to get him down, he can exhaust him on the ground, because as we know, the judges see the person on the bottom as losing the fight. So the urgency that you have in MMA to get off of the ground and get back to your feet, or at least get to the top position of the grappling exchange, is essential. You have to know how to get there quickly, and you'll exhaust yourself trying to do it. So Sugar Sean's got to avoid that. And it's an interesting fight for many reasons, but I think the wrestler versus grappler, the striker versus grappler situation is alive and well in this one.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I have this kind of similar assessment with a few caveats to it. So Merab, 100%, it's no secret that he's got to get Sean O'Malley to the ground. He cannot trade with him on the feet and think he's going to have any success of winning this fight.
We've seen him cracked against everybody else on the way to
Sean. Henry Cejudo cracked him, and Henry Cejudo's for all intents and purposes, a 125er. Merab Dvalishvili, if he has an Achilles heel, it's that he's not the cleanest striker. And that's because he grew up wrestling. And, a lot of times they talk about, and I was listening, this is kind of off topic, but listening to Andrew Huberman the other day talk about building central nervous systems. And when strikers and grapplers are training from a young age, they almost form their central nervous system around that particular skill set, which I like to nerd out on those little things. And that's why he said, if you start striking at 25 years old, or you start wrestling at 25 years old, you can get to a high level, but you can't get to the most elite level against the guys who have that ingrained in their body from the times their bodies and brains were developing. And that's what Merab has when it comes to wrestling. He has that fully ingrained in him. He can do it without even thinking twice. But with striking, he has to kind of think about what he's going to do, think about the setups that he wants to, kind of try to read the shots, but sometimes against a lethal striker like Sean, when you're trying to get a read, it's already too late because you're getting hit with the shot that you were trying to read. So he's got to get it to the ground. But Merab doesn't get you to the ground and then submit you like Aljo did, or like, another really lethal grappler. Merab is a decision guy. We have to call a spade a spade. Now, he dominates people, don't get me wrong, but he wins most fights by decision. I think 85+% of his fights in the UFC have been won via decision. And so I think he needs to do more than get the fight to the ground. He needs to do damage to Sean O'Malley when he's on the ground. And I'm talking damage that disrupts what Sean's able to do at the beginning of the following round. So what do I mean by that? Black his eye, blur his vision a little bit, break his nose with some strikes and some ground and pound, throw some elbows. Not only zap the gas tank, because Sean's going to come into this fight very well conditioned. Against Chito Vera, he looked extraordinarily conditioned, and I expect this to be no different. When you're going up against Merab Dvalishvili and you're as seasoned of a champion as O'Malley is, and you have Tim Welch in your corner, trust me, no stone was left unturned when it comes to cardio. So I expect Sean's cardio to not be at Merab's level, but it's going to be pretty damn good coming into this fight. So what does Merab have to do? Yes, he has to drain that cardio, but he needs to do damage, because if Merab wins this fight, if he is to win, very likely it comes via decision. He's for sure not going to knock Sean O'Malley out, and he's probably not going to submit him. That's just not his game. He has to do it winning round over round. And the only way, and every round starts back again on the feet. And so that's 5 opportunities at minimum. Even if Sean gets taken down and held down from the beginning of the round, he has a minimum of 5 opportunities to crack you on the feet. And what we've seen from O'Malley against lesser strikers is he doesn't even need 5 opportunities sometimes. He just needs a couple of good looks. So I think Merab needs to, in rounds 1, 2, and probably 3, do some damage on the ground. It's not just laying and praying is not the way to win this fight, because it's not going to gas Sean. He'll concede the round. He's a smart guy. He'll keep himself safe. He'll get up, live to fight another round, and try to knock you out in the next round. And he's got several opportunities to do it. So Merab needs to really focus on the damage. He needs to do things that are going to disrupt Sean's abilities to strike when he is given those other opportunities. And as I said, it's going to be a minimum of 5, but in all likelihood, it's probably going to be 10 to 15 or more. And that's assuming that Merab's able to get a takedown in every round. So I think really when it is on the feet with Sean, he needs to be mindful of the distance. He is going to get pieced up if he's at the end of Sean's jab, because Sean's got those beautiful low kicks. He's got some great body kicks. He works a teep really well. And then obviously the bread and butter of that 1-2. I mean, he's got one of the cleanest straight punching games in the entire bantamweight division, probably in the entire UFC. So Merab needs to smother him. He needs to make it like a Mike Tyson, get inside, duck under, actually use your your height disadvantage to actually maybe make it an advantage
Right.
by getting inside, because Sean's not known to be this Muay Thai guy who's got this incredible clinch with elbows and stuff like that. He's a rangy, long fighter. And the last thing I'll say for Merab, when it does come to the feet, don't allow Sean to cut angles, because the way that you're able to get away from a wrestler who's pressuring forward is cutting angles and then, turning position on them where their back's against the cage now and you're safe from getting, pinned against the cage and taken down.
Right.
That game can work both ways. And if you know how to, track your opponent and not chase your opponent, you can keep them pinned. So he's got to be really mindful of that. Don't do all the work to get Sean against the cage and then let him cut angle, because he's going to be looking for that. Sean's not going to want to have his back against the cage with Merab standing in front of him. So you have to mitigate how easily it is for Sean to cut angles. And if it becomes really easy for him, then you're going to do all that work of backing him up and take the risk of having to close distance on Sean O'Malley for nothing, essentially.
Right. And that's a great point. And Sean's very good at using every inch of the octagon. And if he needs to fight on the outside and keep you at bay the whole time, he'll do it. But doing that against somebody that's tracking you and constantly blocking you off and cutting your corners, that's more difficult than somebody that's chasing you. And a lot of times, even at the highest level, you'll see somebody forget about that and they start chasing, and you realize they're not controlling the center of the octagon at all. They're just following the person.
Right.
And a good counter striker, a long, rangy striker like Sean can kind of just piece you apart the entire fight if that's what you're going to do. Merab's smart. He knows not to do that kind of stuff. But one thing I will say, because you've got me thinking about it with the height disadvantage, and that's a great point. But Merab is such a high-level grappler, and there's a couple things I want you to follow me on this. So everybody knows Merab is a great wrestler. He needs to get inside. He needs to get a body lock. He needs to get to your legs, and he can usually get the job done from there. But getting there is harder. It's easier said than done. And Merab, just like a lot of wrestlers, loves to catch a kick and then use that to get inside. If they can get a hold of one of your legs, they can get a hold of your body and then take you to the ground. So Sugar Sean, of course, everybody knows him because of his amazing highlight reels and just the insane variety that he's able to throw. They're like, oh man, he's great with his hands, but his kicks are insane. And I will agree, his kicks are just as impressive as his hands. But one thing that's really impressive about Sean O'Malley is, depending on who he's fighting, he decides when he's going to take what weapons out. And a lot of times, if he's fighting a wrestler or somebody who's really tenacious for the takedown or to close distance, he will avoid some of those kicks. He'll avoid some of the more flashy, interesting spinning moves and high kicks and head kicks and stuff. And he'll put those in a tasteful way. He won't overdo them. You can't give a guy like Merab Dvalishvili or anybody in the top 5 of a UFC division any more than about 2 or 3 looks as to what you're going to do. If you throw a head kick and they block it, basically that tells you, okay, that head kick's not available for me right now. I got to do some more work elsewhere before I can look for that again. And Merab Dvalishvili only needs 1 or 2 reads to understand what you're doing and how to avoid it. So I think Sean is going to win this fight mostly with his hands. And I think a key punch and a key weapon that he's going to use is an uppercut up the middle. Because when you're dealing with a wrestler, they do need to close the distance. They need to change levels and get inside. But the same thing can be said for knees that was said with kicks. All a wrestler needs is your leg. So you don't want to risk being on one leg, throwing your knee up the middle for something that might not land flush. Your uppercut can do the same job as your knee, and that way you still keep your solid base, you get both of your feet on the ground, and you can move laterally, you can sprawl, you can do what you need to do. And also, after you throw the uppercut, it's kind of like a built-in frame. So you can start to use your hands to keep your opponent at bay without having to use your kicks. And then, of course, the gas tank will come into play. And I'm interested to see who's going to be more gassed at the end of this fight. My money would be on Sugar Sean, but after his last fight, we saw how good and poised he was all the way into the very end of the fight. And that's because he was doing what he likes to do. If you give Sean 25 minutes to go out there and strike with somebody and hit him like a heavy bag, he can do that all day long, no problem. If you make him get up off the ground time and time again, that's going to be a little bit more exhausting. And the same thing can be said for Merab. Merab has built up his cardio to be really good in the grappling world. But if you're getting tagged constantly on the feet and you can't find your way inside, then your shots get a little more telegraphed. It's a little bit easier to see your entries. Your punching and your striking gets a little bit more desperate, and that leaves you susceptible to more counter striking that Sugar Sean's so good at, and you can't risk getting hit by. So I think Merab, his way to get inside is actually going to be a little bit more complex because Sugar Sean, like you said, he's with one of the best coaches in the game right now. And I know he's young, but Tim Welch is doing a lot of great things. And Sugar seems to be the mastermind who's got a perfect sidekick that just they've got the formula. It works for them, and they don't need to change much. But what they're doing game plan wise, like, okay, we're fighting a wrestler. Let's avoid some of these kicks. Your hands are good enough to keep them at bay, and that keeps your base and everything on the feet. That's very important. So I look for Sugar Sean to win this fight mostly with his hands. A lot of great combinations. Once he starts to open Merab up, he's going to look for some more finishing blows. But I think he's going to try to zap Merab's energy, his ability to fight, and probably bruise him up and bang him up a little bit on the face to slow Merab's roll down. And I think by the end of this fight, we could see Merab look like the more gassed fighter as far as technique goes and his ability to implement his game plan. So I say that to tell you, I believe Sugar Sean will win this fight. I think it's actually going to be a knockout. I think Merab is going to put up a good fight. He'll probably win a round or two in the early parts, and I think Sugar Sean is going to have to deal with a lot of adversity in this fight. We're going to see some things we have never seen from him. I think we're going to see a lot of time of him on the ground, but we're going to see some good calmness down there. We're going to see some good techniques. We're going to realize he's not just some good striker, but I do think ultimately he's going to keep the fight on the feet long enough to find a knockout. I think he's going to do it with his hands. We'll see a little bit of flash come out if he starts to get Merab rocked or dazed a little bit, but he'll stick with his bread and butter, his clean, crisp striking, his boxing primarily, and I think he gets the job done. Probably round 4 TKO.
Well, perfect. So my next tee up was going to be what does Sean need to do to win the fight, but you just went ahead and carried that on. So I'll give my thoughts and then give my prediction as well. So a couple of thoughts about what Sean needs to do specifically to win the fight. Right. And it's easy to just say all the opposite things of what I said Merab needs to do to him. Don't allow that to happen to yourself. Right. The uppercut is something that I was thinking as well. I was also thinking knee, but as you were giving the reasons why the knee probably wouldn't be the best tool, and Sean is so good with those uppercuts and he can catch them. If the uppercut's landing and that's keeping Merab at bay, there really is no need to take that risk of doing a jump knee or throwing just a straight knee up the middle because you're, compromising your position even if it's just for a split second. Merab may even read that and say, you know what, I'm just going to bite down, eat this knee, hope it hits my chest so it slows down before it hits my face, one of those things, because I'm just going to grab him and take him down from there. But and
even rest on the bottom, on the ground once he gets there, if it does take a lot out of him.
Right.
And not to cut you off, but a knee is actually a far shorter strike. It requires a closer range than a kick. And if Merab can catch a kick on people, which he's done successfully throughout his whole career, he can certainly catch a knee as well. So I think that's the main reason why I don't see that happening. I think the uppercut's the safer move for Sugar Sean, at least at first.
Yeah, and I think as far as kicking is concerned, he needs to keep the kick game low. Damage the legs of a wrestler, that's fair game. You shouldn't try to catch a calf kick. If you do, and Sean is a good enough striker to read that, he will take the chance of throwing a head kick, because if he can get you to think a calf kick's coming or a low quad kick's coming, and he sees that your tendency is to reach down and grab for it, he may roll the dice and try to shut your lights out with a head kick, which is very possible. But I think the kick should be utilized to slow down the entries, because Sean's going to have a hard time defending all the takedowns. He's probably going to get taken down a time or two. How do you slow down the entries of a wrestler? You crack them with stuff up the middle, good uppercuts, good straight punches, and cutting angles. But if you can deaden the machine, which is the legs, which gets you from point A to point B, you can't do any wrestling or close any distance without your legs. Right. So if you can make those a little bit heavy and they're bruising a little bit, the circulation's not really flowing like how it was in the beginning of the fight, that's a key element to having success. Don't throw a lot of the body kicks, because as you said, Merab's really good at catching those and then off balancing you, sweeping the other leg and ending up on top of you.
Avoid push kicks and teep kicks too, because those are the same thing. He can catch them right there from the inside.
Exactly. So I think Sean's kick game needs to be low. I think that he needs to really try his best to maintain frame, maintain base, and not end up on his back, really fight for position when Merab does have him against the cage, clinch. Don't just concede a takedown and say, oh, I'll, wait for the next round. Because if Merab does some of the stuff that I was talking about, in trying to do damage, if he is able to, get a cut. We've seen some weird things happen. Right. This is happening in Vegas, so the doctors and the referees and all are seasoned. But if he can split Sean open or do something like that, it's not going to bode well for O'Malley in the later rounds as things go along. So really don't just concede the takedown. Really fight to defend it, which is easier said than done. With a fighter like Merab. But I think also the key thing for Sean here is going to be a little bit of patience, because we know that Merab's going to come from the first moment. But if you start to land on him with good patient strikes, you're calculated, boom, you land an uppercut when he comes in, and that frazzles him. And then he tries to close distance, and 1-2, you crack him again. He's going to start to get a little bit desperate for the shot. And what did we see when Sean fought Aljo? We saw Aljo completely abandon what looked like all technique and just kind of run in on Sean.
Right.
And that set him up for the perfect finisher, or what set up the finish. Ultimately, the ground and pound was what got the job done, but that shot on the feet is what started the party. So definitely he needs to look for Merab to come in sloppy.
Yeah.
And so if you can start to irritate him on your entries and start to crack him a few times, he may take kind of a half-assed shot. And if he does that, that's where Sean's opportunity to land the real power is going to be. So I think patience and shot selection is going to be key for Sean, and I think he's going to choose the right ones. I'm picking Sean by TKO, 3rd round.
Okay, so we got a pretty similar call.
Similar prediction. So let's move on.